Awesome. Well, Jackie and I have partnered together for, I don't know, over a year now, probably, as our team started looking for a tool. But I thought it would be helpful to go back to, before that, because product ops is such a hot topic right now. So Jackie, if you could share a little bit with myself, the audience, what got you into product ops?
Sure. So for me, it was sort of a natural progression of my career. I started out in agency in project management, program management, and digital production. So kind of worked my way up the chain from producer to executive producer, and eventually I was the VP of program management for a large agency in San Diego. And I think the higher you get, the more you start to focus on kind of the interconnecting pieces of things versus like the nitty gritty day to day of things. And that perspective helps. And then I also think that, the creative problem solving and solution oriented mindset that goes along with that role, along with kind of this like stakeholder client management. You've got a lot of personalities, a lot of different points of view that you need to bring together to a common understanding. And I think that building those skills kind of helped carry over and lead me into this place where, that applies really greatly to your ability to, you have to get product, you have to get engineering, you have to get marketing. Like we touch so many things that touch so many different departments in your organization. So kind of having that muscle really helps to get a consensus and make sure you're rolling out things that is meaningful and solving problems across the board and not just from one lens. And so from a skill set perspective, I think that's where it helped. And then at some point I just got a little bit burnt out on agency and I wanted to change, and the stars kind of just aligned and led me to Tealium.
Well, that's a good segue into Tealium. What does it look like with product ops at Tealium? Because I know you've mentioned it was started basically with you. So how does one start a product ops, and what does that look like at Tealium, and what are the team goals that you guys are focusing on?
So I was the first hire when the product organization actually started at Tealium. And at the time, it wasn't called product operations, but I was hired because of my project management and operations background to help put some rigor around how we were working. And so I think, depending on where your company is in your journey, your focus and your charter is probably going to be different. So for us, we were building from the ground up. And so our focus was really on like operational efficiency and foundational processes. How do we do what we do, but do it smarter, faster, better, the least amount of admin overhead possible, trying to help PMs focus on solving customer problems, making strategic decisions, and not really in the weeds on and worrying about how to get things done. Like, how do we make those things faster for them? So things like improving our intake process, idea management, go-to-market processes, enablement and training for internal stakeholders and groups. So we've been focusing a lot on those areas. And structurally, I think Tealium might be a little bit different than other companies because we expect our product operations managers to also play a scrum master role, which is a little unique. But I find that to also be kind of organic in that it's still a part of operating and delivering. And it also kind of strengthens the connectivity between engineering and product, especially in these early stages where we were, going from an engineering-led organization to having product. So I think that thread has helped us strengthen that muscle.
So has it evolved much since you've started, or have that been the same focus the whole time?
I would say that the focus itself hasn't really evolved. It was more about like the problems we tackled evolving and getting more complicated. I think like we started out like with a very specific charter of improve our go-to-market process and our enablement. Like we need to be better at making sure customer success, sales, marketing, everybody has what they need in order to handle their pieces of the business when a feature launches. So that was like our first kind of stamp that we were given to follow. And along the way, I think we've just picked up more on that same operational efficiency kind of theme, but growing it into, all right, now how do we standardize bug intake? How do we put some process around how we plan work? What other fundamental measures can we get in place, like template libraries, customer interview prep guides, archive libraries for customer interview outputs so that PMs can cross-share the learnings that they have. And then, you know, sort of as we and product management matured, then like what the areas of our focus kind of mature with it. So now we were focusing more on, all right, now let's look at our wider portfolio management. And that's kind of what led us to Dragonboat. You know, how can we have a better picture of our end-to-end organizational portfolio roadmap? And this effort also included things like establishing a scoring model, refining our planning and road mapping processes, implementing working backwards, and looking at our end-to-end product lifecycle and how do we operationalize sort of like the artifacts that the PM need to create along the way, discovery and research activities, and not as a means to be prescriptive, but like just giving them tools to help guide them and help us have like a baseline foundational standard of how our product management organization operates, so that when you're moving from team to team, you're not getting these like varying things happening. So a lot of standardization has been a big focus of ours as well.
Yeah, it sounds like it's evolved quite a bit since you started. So
Yes.
curious,
and
how do you see it?
It'll keep evolving.
Yeah, how do you see it continuously evolving? Not, I mean, it could involve tools, but just like the overall team itself, do you see it growing? How do you see
Yes.
the product ops working with the rest of the organization in the future?
I think it'll continue on the same trajectory, but pulling in more responsibilities, and starting to expand in different areas like data collection, data tools management, processes and methods that will enable PMs to access, digest, and act on information, to make even better data-driven decisions without all the overhead that they have to go through to harvest and find the data. So I think that's probably the next evolution for us here.
Got it. Well, that kind of leads into the challenges you were facing. I mean, you guys have done a lot, a lot since you've joined and a lot since you and I've been working together. So thinking back to like, you know, a year or so ago, maybe you were facing these challenges before, but what were those pain points and challenges that led you to searching for a tool and realizing we need something to consolidate all of this?
Sure. So it's sort of like the why we selected Dragonboat is probably a similar answer to the question. We had these itches we needed to scratch. We needed to have a single source of truth for idea management. We needed to enable smarter outcome-based decisions. We needed to be able to provide senior leadership visibility into the investments being made, and general visibility into what was going on with the roadmap, because there was a lot of feeling like things would go into a black box and no one would know what was coming out the other side and when. Not because the information wasn't there, but because the information wasn't being shared in a consumable way or an accessible way, or in a trustable way. So I think those were the big rock challenges that we were trying to tackle when we started looking for a tool like this.
Okay. Well, you and I partnered together to create a deck for your team. So I want to show that with everyone, and I'll pull up the why Dragonboat so we can talk a little bit about why you really picked Dragonboat.
There you go.
Here we go. If you want to walk through this, I know you shared this with your product managers and probably some other stakeholders. But how do those challenges you were just describing tie into this why Dragonboat?
Sure. So when we set out to look for a portfolio management tool, you know, because there are so many options out there, it can be overwhelming, right? So we wanted to ground in what you're looking at here, which were like the main goals that we had in mind when we were evaluating a tool. So that's where we started versus looking at tools and just figuring out their capabilities. What do we actually want to get out of stuff like product management? What are the problems we want to solve? And then what are the tools that can solve those problems versus looking at the tools first? So this is where we landed on this bullet list of single source of truth, smarter outcome-based decisions, the visibility, streamlining status and increasing cross-functional transparency. So before we had this tool, we had statuses in all different places. They were manually updated, sometimes not consistently, not accessible to everybody. So trying to streamline that. And then improving confidence with better resource estimating and planning. So that was our kind of short list of main goals. Not to say that these were the only problems we had to solve, but these were the big things.
The big vision.
And so, I went through this evaluation, narrowed down the tools, did a couple of pilot programs where Dragonboat being one of them, where I actually asked a couple of PMs who volunteered to go into the tool, start using the tool, give me their perspective on how it could help them in their day-to-day. While I, in parallel, went in and was creating views and playing around and seeing like what sort of stakeholder management types of activities it could also suffice. And at the end of the day, we landed on Dragonboat for a number of reasons. The first and foremost was that truly it was one of, if not the only solution I could find that actually focused on outcome-based decision element, allowing us to tie our feature ideas directly to our company OKRs and product objectives, which then tied into our ability to slice and dice things and create these reports that show the cross-org senior leadership visibility into where their investments are being made and how is their money being spent against the goals that they have set for the organization. And so those two things combined were very big wins. And then what put it over the edge, well, there were a couple of things that put it over the edge, but the Twowayjira integration was a huge factor because all the other tools that I found had a one-way integration where you could push to Jira, but it wouldn't go back. And so having this really flexible and robust two-way integration allows product to do whatever they need to do, however they need to do it in Dragonboat, and without asking engineering to change a single thing about how they operate day to day. And also allowing product to be in their Scrum teams in Jira, managing stories and all that stuff, and knowing that the connectivity is there and that the data is always going to be in sync. And that was a really big thing for me, as trying to establish this single source of truth, rather than these other tools where I would then know that there was always going to be this kind of split of information. Kind of the way y'all supported me, like you held my hand through all of this stuff, and helping me come up with it really felt more like a partnership than a vendor-customer relationship. And knowing that you guys would be there for me to help me figure out the right way, the best way, best practices, and the kind of, you were as much invested in my success as I was.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, we hear very similar challenges from all of the customers we talk to, and a lot of times, I mean, you mentioned the connectivity and being able to have one single source of truth. I remember you talking about your PMs and they had to spend so much time creating these status updates or updating things when now it's automated, right? Like it's automated into Dragonboat, and that can be shared with everyone, which is a huge time saver for PMs who already don't have that much time on their hands. Exactly.
Now they just go in and write a little blurb explaining why the health is what it is and what their risks are. And, they always know where to go, and everybody always knows where to go to get that information.
And I think one thing, and maybe you'll talk about this in a little bit, but one thing you mentioned to me was that just the fact that people were holding them accountable for this data is huge. And that now people are looking at this and it has to be right.
That was a big factor in adoption, because, adoption is a tricky thing. You train people on something and, it's new, B, they're busy. And so there are some people who embrace it right away. And there are others who, take a little bit longer, take a little more persistence and follow up. But I think that once we got to the stage where we rolled out read access across the organization, and the PMs knew that, you know, other people are really relying on the accuracy of this information, I think that kind of drove it home, you know, because now we've got marketing looking at it, you know, to make sure, you know, they're tracking where we are in the roadmap so that they can plan their strategic storytelling, right? Like their marketing calendar, what features are we going to talk about when and how? And if they're not getting the right information, it really throws a wrench into their ability to do their own planning.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know a lot of people face very similar challenges like we talked about. So I want to talk about the more tactical of how you guys did this. So in this deck that you and I created, we also have our rollout plan. Let me go to the next slide here. So walk me through how you did this. How did you get the PMs to buy into this and adopt? I know you mentioned the accountability, but walk us through what that looked like.
Sure. So again, the first step of kind of laying the foundation. And so we knew we had a lot of problems to solve, right? Even just from the bullet list of the goals that we had, it was a lot to tackle. So we didn't want to overwhelm ourselves or the PMs. And that's why we created this kind of phased approach. Like what goals do we want to hit when, so that it's like a kind of strategic rolling rollout, for lack of a better phrase. So the first up was just creating the visibility and getting everything into Jira, from Jira into Dragonboat. So the first thing I did was work with product leadership to look at and define and make sure we had the right OKRs and product objectives entered, and then the rest of the portfolio data. You know, how did we want to use categories, quarters, phases, stages, and all the available data in Dragonboat, and kind of creating this terminology alignment between what, you know, how we were going to define those things as it relates to Tealium. And along the way, I started documenting that and creating like a help guide space in Confluence. And I focused on terminology alignment, and then kind of what the major features and workflows that the PMs would need to become familiar with off the bat, so that it could narrow their focus on, like, don't get overwhelmed by everything this tool can do. Look at these things that we're asking you to focus on, what this, like, using this tool for right now. And that included screenshots with, you know, descriptions, as well as some screencast videos of here's how you update status. Here's how you can create and save your own views, all of that kind of thing. And then prior to doing the kickoff, my team helped me import everything into Dragonboat from Jira on their behalf for the product managers, so that they could come in and sort of see the basic way we wanted everything organized and not have to worry about that lifting. So that was really helpful as well. And then this deck that you created, that helped me create with these 2 slides, went into explaining that terminology and giving them a little more information on the functionality, kind of walking them through some of the stuff that was going to be in the help guide. It also included a field glossary, you know, what all the fields were in Dragonboat and how we wanted them to be used and expected them to be used. And then some kind of quick tips for, you know, how PMs could incorporate Dragonboat into their day-to-day to make their lives easier. So that was like the initial push rollout. We also created a support channel in Slack where they could ask questions, they could ping me directly. And then after like a couple weeks, I did like rolling one-on-ones with every PM to give them an opportunity to ask questions. I would check in, how are they doing? What areas of were they having any sticky points and all of that stuff. So I kind of hit it on a number of different angles, documentation and conversation, to try and drive it home as hard as possible.
Cool. And I know your plan has kind of evolved too. So not only does product ops at Tealium, but even, you know, bringing on a tool and what you want to focus on has evolved, because you can see in this this rollout that there are still some things that you guys are bringing on today. So it's not like you have to implement everything all at once, but you can use the tool how it fits with your product ops and your product vision.
100%. Like, prioritize your problems and then solve them in that order is kind of how the approach that we took.
Yeah.
And so resource planning is one of the ones where we're using it, but we got some inspection and adaptation to do to see like, how do we actually incorporate, like we used it for a planning round and it was very, very helpful. And now I think the next evolution of that piece is how do we incorporate that a little bit more fluidly throughout our operating model? And then we're focusing a lot on idea collection and management. So we just went through requirements gathering and a capabilities assessment, and we're now compiling some workflows for how we want to see things go through the system from the feedback originating to the idea management.
Mhm.
And we're going to take those back to Becky and the engineering team at Dragonboat and work with y'all to figure out the right way and connectivity to maintain Dragonboat as our idea management solution. So it's still that source of truth, but plugging into and importing feedback from all these different outside sources and channels that the feedback originates from. Mm-hmm. So PMs still living and breathing in Dragonboat without having to worry about ideas being scattered because it centralizes it for them and gives them the ability to filter it and organize it and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at idea management and collection starts to involve other stakeholders. So not only in giving that feedback, but we've talked about your status report, your other reporting that you're doing. So what other teams at Tealium are involved with Dragonboat and what are the benefits that they're seeing?
Sure. So as I said, it is the single source of truth that has been established. It's our single source of truth for our organizational level portfolio management, health, and status. So read access is available to all of our senior leadership. I've created reports for them, but they also have the ability to slice things how they want to see it if they choose to. Obviously, the entire product management team is using it to score, rank, plan, aggregate. They score, rank, and plan their initiatives. We're also using it to aggregate all the links to the key artifacts and documentation related to each initiative. So if you open an initiative in Dragonboat, you'll see your go-to-market plan, your press release, your FAQs document, everything is organized in there so you have a central place and aren't searching for things in a number of different areas. I think marketing is probably one of the biggest consumers as well. Because as I said earlier, they need the information in order to strategize and plan their calendar. Right. And so they rely a lot on the information and health and status of everything being maintained in Dragonboat, which the PMs, they do it pretty fluidly, but at a minimum, they're updating health biweekly. So that it'll never be more out of date than 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Cool. What about like executive leadership, sharing views with your boss, other VPs?
Yeah. My boss is in Dragonboat all the time looking at the status of things. We have like a biweekly engineering and product leadership meeting where we go through dashboards and look at the health of everything. It's used to manage up in C-level meetings. So it really did check that box completely of providing visibility throughout the organization from a single place and not having multiple different status documents in multiple different places where you just can't trust the information because you don't know how outdated it is. So everything is centralized and that visibility is used to manage up and out throughout the entire organization.
Mm-hmm. I've heard from some other customers that we've worked with that similar thing where, you've got all these different parties accessing this information, and not only are they better informed, but they're better informed so they can make better decisions. Have you seen that be the case at Tealium?
Yeah, I think that marketing for sure is probably a great example of that. They're able to look at this calendar, look at our calendar of our rollout, dive into some of the details of the descriptions. And without having to ask 100 people 100 different questions, they can now start to link things together and think about the stories they want to tell without all this overhead of not being able to trust the information, not knowing where to find the information. So they get this snapshot view of everything in one place. And I think it really helps them to be able to pick and group and figure out how they want to tell their marketing story for Tealium based on the rolling features that we're continuously providing, and then Dragonboat providing the view of when to expect those things. So I'd say that's probably one of the biggest examples of that.
Cool. Yeah, you don't have a middleman anymore that's needing to then relay the information to someone else.
I mean, there's conversation that happens still, but it's a lot more self-serving.
Yeah. Then they have more time on their hands.
Exactly.
I was gonna ask you what's next for Tealium, because we've talked about it evolving. So what would be the next thing that you see for coming year or even further?
Yeah, I think we touched on probably a lot of that already in terms of, I think the evolution in general of our focus is going to be a lot more on data collection and then data enablement. But right now we're moving into this idea collection and management as a really big focus area. And then also, once you roll things out, and they're never perfect. And so I think a lot of our charter will continuously inspecting and adapting what we have rolled out to see what optimizations we can make. Going back and talking to the PMs again, how is this working for you? Are there ways we can automate it even further and just kind of keep building on what we have established so far while having these next couple of steps lined up is where I see us focusing.
Yeah, I love that you're flexible on making changes and just helping it be better across the board. No matter, like, if you changed it last week, there's still room to evolve and improve, which is awesome. I mean, you're being agile, which is also a hot topic these days. So you think about your journey with product ops, Dragonboat, what would be your advice for someone who's, looking to get into product ops or already in product ops and wanting to scale it at their company? Where would you start, and what's the best advice you have?
Sure. First and foremost, I think don't overwhelm yourself and don't take on too much at once. Focus on your burning problems to solve, so that you can kind of hone in on things and not be feel like you're boiling the ocean. So really, like, working with your leadership to identify the big rock problems you want to solve first and prioritize them, and then tackle one thing at a time. Is a really big piece of advice. Try not to introduce too many tools at once, and try not to have multiple tools that solve the same problem. I think is a really big one too. And don't be afraid to evolve your team charter over time. As you go, your areas of focus are going to mature along with your team. So it's okay that your focus areas mature. It's okay that your charter changes. And I think it's a natural progression of the maturity of both your product operations org and your company organization in general. And be patient, I think, is a really big one. We're change agents, and change is hard for people. Humans don't like it. My boss said this quote to me, I'm not sure what the origin of it is, but change happens slowly and then all at once. And I think that I find that to be extremely accurate and applicable to our discipline and to our industry.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you look at how busy product orgs in general are, but I love that you said just start with the biggest things, and it could be super simple. It doesn't have to be something that's like the five-year goal. You can start with something that is more immediate, but then it's a big rock right now, and you just kind of evolve as time goes on,
right? And
see what those biggest priorities are.
And as you check things off and start to see the benefits, it gives you motivation and confidence to keep going and scaling outwards as well. So I think, if you look just it's not that it's not important to look ahead, but if you're only focusing on that, it might stifle you from just making progress in the here and now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what kind of ties it back to Dragonboat. You've got that outcome focused vision, but you're connecting it back with the execution, which is
exactly
what not many people do. It's hard to do because there's a lot of data in all these different places, but I mean, I've seen it help you guys at Tealium and a lot of other customers, just that you have that single source of truth where you can rely on data. You're seeing how you're measuring up to those goals, but then you're also completing things.
100%. Yeah. And, music to my ears when, my boss pings me and said, I answered my own question in Dragonboat without having to ask 7 different people.
Oh, awesome. Well, I know we're a couple minutes over, so thank you, Jackie. I don't know if Baji wants to jump on, or it's great getting to hear about your journey and just where you've started with not just with Dragonboat, but just with product ops, and seeing that evolve and bring you into our community at Dragonboat.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And we love to hear the feedback on more than just a vendor relationship. We really look to Tealium as part of the family, and we really value the work that you guys have done and the success that you've had. So nice to hear that. Thank you so much, Jackie, for joining. Thank you for sharing. Brittany, thanks for diving in and helping to share a little bit more from our side, the experience like it's been working with Jackie. So love to see that kind of dual approach. Lovely conversation from you both. Thank you again, and have a great rest of your day.
You as well.
Bye.